Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm David Patton, and joining us now is David Brody, the Chief Political Correspondent for the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN. He's author of the fascinating new book, The Evangelicals, the inside story of how the evangelicals and the Tea Parties are taking back America. Mr. Brody, thank you so much for joining us.
David, a pleasure to be here.
Well, your book explores the alliance, if you will, between grassroots conservatives and social conservatives, specifically evangelical Christians. Were you initially surprised when polls showed that some 40 to 50% of the Tea Party members who espouse a return to small government constitutionalism turned out to be evangelical Christians?
Yeah, I think I was surprised to a degree, and then I started to find out as the surveys went on, that 40 to 50% number actually came out to be more like 50 to potentially 55% of the Tea Party. So you can definitely make the case that there are conservative Christians that make up a majority of the Tea Party. I have to tell you, David, when I first got to these rallies in 2009 and 2010, the first thing I noticed that they were opening these Tea Party rallies with prayer, and I actually saw a couple of prayer circle groups at these Tea Party rallies, and they were praying for our country, and they were praying for everything from the debt ceiling to the balanced budget amendment. They literally were praying for this stuff, and I said, well, maybe I should do some interviews. And when I went around, I talked to them. I noticed they were indeed, many of them, conservative Christians. Sure, there are libertarians out there as well, but the truth is, they're conservative and they're Christian. And so I had to come up with a name for it. I figured, hey, we need a moniker of some sort. I went with Tea Party Christian at first. I said, oh, that's a little too boring. And then I said, well, how about a Christian Tea Partier? And I said, hey, that's too radical for the Christians. And I said, well, you know what, Evangelical, perfect. And that's exactly what they are.
I think one reason, David, that alliance has taken some people by surprise is when you think of evangelicals, you think of issues like pro-family, pro-life, social issues, but we don't hear the Tea Parties take that up much. Why not?
Yeah, because pretty much the Tea Party wants to stay true to what its mantra is, what its agenda is, which we all know is constitutional limited government. But here's the shocking news for the mainstream media, and that is that, guess what? Evangelicals are not a one or two trick pony. It's not just about the life issue. It's just not about the marriage issue only. They actually care about pocketbook issues. What a shock that evangelicals care about this type of stuff. They care about the future of our country and our grandchildren's children and all of that. They care about what's going on in this country as it relates to debt. If you look at some of the organizations, the typical evangelical organizations, I like to call them T-evangelical organizations, like Ralph Reed's Faith and Freedom Coalition, Concerned Women for America, Family Research Council. David, look at their congressional scorecards. They have the life issue, they're scoring on that, the marriage issue as well, but they're also scoring on things like, do you support a balanced budget amendment? What about the debt ceiling? You can go on, term limits. The point, constitutional overreach with Obamacare. It is a whole full smorgasbord plate for evangelicals. And so for this idea that the media has where evangelicals just care about one or two issues, not true, and it hasn't been true for some time now.
Now, another aspect of the Tea Party movement that took the mainstream press by surprise is its staying power, as has recently been seen by the success of Scott Walker in Wisconsin, Richard Murdoch in Indiana, Deb Fischer in Nebraska. How much of this persistent longevity stems perhaps from the stalwart participation of committed evangelicals?
Oh, well, it makes all the difference in the world. I contend in the book that if you actually took conservative Christians away from the Tea Party, as we like to say in evangelical speak, if you raptured them out of the movement, you're left with about half a movement. And no disrespect to Tea Party libertarians, but Tea Party libertarians by themselves aren't going to do the trick. You would not have any sustained momentum with just Tea Party libertarians. Conversely, you're not going to have much sustained momentum with conservative Christians as well in terms of this big, huge movement. You put the two together, it's a much different scenario. And David, this is what we're seeing around the country. These Tea Party rallies that we saw in 2010, around that time, time, they're really not happening as much anymore. Well, why is that exactly? Well, there are a couple reasons for that, but the truth is that these signs that we used to see, they decided that, you know what, why am I at a rally with a sign when I should be in my local community affecting change? And that's where the Tea Party is now. They're in the local communities, they're running for city council, school board, they're getting initiatives passed in places like Florida, Texas, I can go on and on. But that's what's going on. Alan West told me a couple of months ago that the Tea Party, these evangelicals, are like a blob. You know, the movie The Blob. You never quite know what form it's going to take, where it's going to show up, but it's there and it's menacing, especially to liberals in this country.
I'm also curious whether you believe evangelicals have had a moderating effect on the Tea Parties in terms of keeping them from possible extremes like eliminating Medicare, complete privatization of Social Security, or cutting out the social safety net entirely?
Now, that's a great question. You know, if you take just the libertarian view of everything, you know, it's limited government and they want it pretty much as strict as possible. Evangelicals have a more nuanced view of that. There's no doubt about it. I mean, if you poll evangelicals, they want to rein in spending, ... Oh, by the way, don't touch my Medicare, especially if I'm 55 or older. Under 55, a different ball game, Paul Ryan's budget and all of that. They seem to be a little bit more simpatico with that. But yes, there is definitely a moderating influence because, once again, that Tea Party libertarian view only isn't going to get it done. Potentially too extreme for the rest of the country. Evangelicals kind of bring in more of that, if you will, nuanced view to the point where they can all kind of seem to kind of get along a little bit better.
David, why do you think so many evangelicals see the juggernaut growth of the federal government as something that's really a threat to the Judeo-Christian ethic?
Well, it's really this simple, and I talk about this in the book. They believe that government is getting bigger than God. God is getting smaller, government is getting bigger, and that's the way they see it. You know, Tea Party libertarians like to say we want to return to constitutionally limited government. Evangelical Christians, these T-evangelicals, see it as a return to Judeo-Christian principles. It's the same thing, just said and cloaked a different way.
Now, on Morning Joe on Tuesday, you noted that Mitt Romney has something John McCain did not, which is 3.5 years of President Obama to run against. Will that be enough to overcome what is reportedly the reluctance of some evangelical Christians to vote for a Mormon?
I think it's a very dangerous proposition if the Romney campaign thinks that is going to be enough. Is it going to be a great head start over what John McCain had to work with? Absolutely. Will it put Mitt Romney in the game of potentially winning the nomination? Absolutely. Can it actually make him win the nomination? Not at all, David. I think what you need to see here and what you need to look for is these T-evangelicals. Where will the passion be when it comes to these T-evangelicals? They are the worker bees of, in essence, the Republican Party. We know this. The evangelicals are, the Tea Party, all of them coming together. They're the ones that need to work for Romney in 2012. Look, I mean, the people, these T-evangelicals who voted for Santorum and Gingrich and Bachmann and Perry and Kaine, you know, all of them split their vote. But in 2012, those folks that voted for those other folks will vote for Romney. There's no doubt about it over Obama. The question is, will they bring a friend and will they organize? And I think that's the real key. So what the Romney campaign needs to look to do is somehow incorporate or take a page out of Rick Santorum's playbook and start to weave a pro-family message in. It can't just be about metrics and the economy and the unemployment rate and things that Romney loves to discuss, which is numbers. If Romney can get beyond the numbers and start to talk to this T-evangelical audience, boy, it's going to make a world of difference.
But you know, I'm not so sure he's going to reach out to them. And the reason I say that, as much as he needs them, he sailed through the primaries without courting either the Tea Parties or the evangelical vote. You write in the book that he must have the active support of the T-evangelicals if he hopes to defeat Obama. I agree. But do you think that Romney will really reach out to them in the way he needs to, or will the Obama fatigue be so strong that he may not have to?
Well, I don't think he has to reach out to them in overt ways. So, for example, I don't think you need all of a sudden he's going to be at some sort of pro-life seminar in Tupelo, Mississippi. You know, I mean, it's not going to be that type of reach out effort, so to speak. However, A good vice presidential pick will go a long way to satisfying this evangelical crowd. Once again, rolling all of this into his stump speech, what we just talked about, that pro-family message, will go a long way to kind of giving a wink and a nod to saying, hey, I'm with you, I'm simpatico with that. But there is two things here, David. There's two aspects. One, what's going on in front of the camera, what you see. What is he doing where evangelicals, these evangelicals can actually see what's happening. There's another story entirely different going on behind the scenes, how Romney is courting evangelical leaders, whether it be Tony Perkins, Ralph Reed, I can go down the list, Penny Nance, Concerned Women for America, many other evangelical leaders. He is doing that. We detail in the book all about meetings with focus on the family. Quite frankly, David, as far back as 2006, he was having meetings with evangelical leaders. I detail in the book one instance where in 2006 he was meeting with Franklin Graham, the late Jerry Falwell. I can go on, Gary Bauer. There were a lot of other evangelical leaders in his home with Ann Romney. They're sitting around a table eating sandwiches. A month later, all these evangelical leaders get a chair, that's right, a chair in the mail from Mitt Romney and Ann Romney. And on the back, there's a plaque on the back of the chair that says, "You will always have a seat at my table." Interesting.
Well, obviously some political outreach going on there. Now, President Obama has come out with this strong gay marriage stance, but some pundits say that really won't hurt him because the evangelicals weren't going to vote for him anyway. What's your take on that?
Well, the marriage issue can get a little bit complicated. I think as it relates to the evangelical audience, this is going to be something to watch because, and I talk about this actually in the book, the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, which eventually is going to come to the Supreme Court. We know this is, it's in essence, it's on its way. It's kind of almost already there. That is going to be a big issue as to, and a challenge for the Tea Party as to how libertarians view the issue and how evangelicals view the issue. Libertarians, about 70% of them say, marriage, listen, we don't want to touch that issue. Evangelicals feel differently. They believe there needs to be some sort of constitutional amendment, a federal marriage amendment. I think this is all coming to a head, and I think this is a potential problem within the Tea Party because evangelicals are going to see this marriage issue as a constitutional issue, constitutional overreach by the judiciary. However, Tea Party libertarians might not be up for the fight. So if you've got 50 to 60% of that Tea Party movement going in one direction and 40%, let's say, of the libertarians, I say 40% because that's pretty much what the figure is, about 40% of the Tea Party is libertarian. You have them going in a different direction, there's some fissure there, there's a split there, and I think it's definitely worth watching.
One broader question about the state of Christendom, if you will, in the United States. The leadership has changed so much over the past couple of decades. It was 20 years ago. We had Billy Graham, of course, Pat Robertson, Dr. Dobson, Jerry Falwell. Today, it seems unclear who is leading the Christian right. Who do you think is leading Christian conservatives, and who do you believe should lead them?
Well, I don't think there's any easy answer to that, David. I mean, and that's part of actually the beauty in what's going on. There isn't that old school mentality anymore. I mean, look at Ralph Reed, for example. He went from the Christian Coalition and now he's running the Faith and Freedom Coalition, which is a whole different, it's morphed. It's somewhat of a different ballgame now because it doesn't just go with the traditional evangelical issues. It's broader than that as it relates to fiscal issues. So, I mean, in terms of personhood, it's really hard to say. There is that old school breed, if you will, and then there's some new folks. But really, I think we're in the process right now of forming who those new leaders are going to be. And I think right now, the country and these evangelicals are in a mood to have no one tell them who their leaders are, just like the Tea Party doesn't want anybody dictating from the top.
Yeah, it just seems to be more bottom-up than it ever used to be. Well, last question. In some ways, November could turn into a test of get-out-the-vote strength between the unions on the one hand and the evangelical-influenced Tea Parties on the other side. If so, which side, Labor for the Democrats, Tea Parties for the small government conservatives, do you expect will likely prevail?
I really do believe that the evangelicals are going to show up in spades, and it's not just because of President Obama. I think there has been some serious outreach going on by some of these evangelical organizations. I've mentioned some of them here today, but those organizations were not as mobilized in 2008, and they didn't have the passion for John McCain as they have now in 2012. The passion isn't so much for Romney, it's that anti-Obama passion. Romney can help his cause if he can get in front of the train, if you will. But there was a lot more going on in 2012 in this arena than 2008. Right now, just to take one example, Ralph Reed's group has they have the cell phone numbers of 13 million evangelical Christians, cell phones and emails, 13 million evangelical Christians. These are 13 million that did not go to the polls in 2008. Ralph Reed contends that if they can get 3 million of those, he thinks maybe 7 million, but if they can get 3 million of those, it's game, set, match. I would tend to agree with that. I think Romney can start sending the thank you notes to evangelicals if 3 million more of them, show up in 2012. I think it's a real possibility, and the unions definitely would be scared at that point. And and by the way, the president might be a tad bit scared too.
David Brody, chief political correspondent for CBN, and author of the new book, The T-Evangelicals, the inside story of how the evangelicals and the Tea Party are taking back America. Thank you so much, Mr. Brody, for sharing your insights and for joining us on Newsmax TV.
David, it's a pleasure. I'll let my mom know where to find this out there.
Excellent. We'll look forward to having her as a viewer as well.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.